What I'd like to do now is call on people to make some family reflections about the moment, about what we're talking about. And I'd like to first call on a wonderful person we've been working with, Annie Meyers. Would you like to say a few words? And anyone else, please feel free to speak up.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Annie Meyers, the niece of Richmond Williams. It's just a pleasure to be here today. I can remember, we always called him Bubba. And anytime Bubba would come back from Chicago, the first thing he would be talking about is wanting to go to Drayton and to visit Drayton, his home. And my first recollection of going into the cemetery was in the late 1950s when my Uncle Frank died. And he was buried there. And then 40 years later, my Uncle Richmond was buried there. My Uncle Richmond loved Drayton. Drayton was his home. And this is where he wanted his resting place. And when he got that okayed, he was so enlightened. He was just saying, I'm going to go back home when I die. And, like I said, in 1998, his wishes was granted. Whenever he came home, and he came home in the late 70s, and he came back to stay. And then he came as a gatekeeper. And as being a gatekeeper, it wasn't so much about just collecting money or just giving out supplies as what was to be reviewed when you come in. But his thing was to let you know the reason for Drayton Plantation. He would tell stories about his life here. And he used to share some of the things even with me. He would tell me about the fact that they didn't have doctors that they were able to go to and they got sick. But they used to have a plant. And they used to call it a fever plant. And he said they would go in the woods and they'd get these leaves from off the fever plant, and it would place those fever plants on the person's forehead who had a real high fever. And you would let it stay there until it turned brown. And when the leaves turned brown, you knew that the fever was going. And then there was another plant said that you used to get was the ginger root. And they would boil the ginger root, and that would help people when they had a real bad cold. And it was just, he would just kind of walk you through the plantation. He would just tell you, well, if you go down this way, you would see this, and if you go the next way, you see that. And he would talk about the grave site, that when somebody died, whatever their profession was, those instruments that they used would be placed on the grave. And just last year, my aunt, who's the only living sibling that's left, 93 years old, was able to come back to Drayton with her children, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren. And she was able to walk them through several areas of the plantation. And it was more of a history that they got that no one else would be able to tell them about. And, you know, she just showed them all around, and she was just really great. And to think about somebody that's 93 years old now that would be able to come back and recollect all of the things that went on from the time she was a youth up until the time she left to go to New York. It was very inspiring for her children and the other family members. When my uncle would come to Charleston, it was like you would think the president was coming to Charleston. My cousins, my aunt, my mother, they would just rally around him. Whatever he wanted, he was able to get. And one of the things that he liked was what they called heron Perlo. And when my mother knew that he was coming, she would go to Red and White and she'd get a pack of heron. And she would soak that heron for a couple of days to get the salt out of it. And she would boil it down, and then she would turn around and she would add rice to it. And he would come and he would sit down to the table, and he'd eat like 2 platefuls. And the rest of them, he would say, "Can I take the rest of them home with me?" He would never leave any for anybody else. But that was one of his pride food recipe that he loved. Um, as a historian, like I said, he was inspirational to the plantation because he was able to really tell him the location of a lot of things that were located on Drayton as a child. And he passed that history over and about to all of his relatives. He loved his family. He cared so much for his family. And I was just glad that he was part of my life. And I miss him. His other nieces and nephews who came up under him knew how much he loved his family and how much he cared. And for this, I just thank all of you all for coming out and taking a part in today's celebration.
Thank you so much.